At 0900 hours on February 26, 1945, the M6A3 rocket detonated against reinforced concrete with the force of 1.66 pounds of high explosive, sending a jet of molten copper through 3 feet of Japanese fortification at 6,000 meters per second. The anti-aircraft gun and its 4-man crew disintegrated in a flash of orange flame. Private First Class Douglas Jacobson dropped the smoking bazooka tube, reloaded alone, and fired again. Another bunker exploded, then another. In the next 20 minutes, this 19-year-old Marine would destroy 20 hardened Japanese positions by himself, wielding a weapon designed for 2 men, changing the course of the Battle of Iwo Jima forever. Before that morning, Douglas Jacobson was nobody special. A draftsman from Port Washington, New York. Summer lifeguard on Long Island beaches. No medals, no glory. Just 3 island campaigns and a lot of volcanic ash in his boots. But by 0920 hours, he would break the Japanese defensive line on Hill 382, the most fortified position on the entire island, and save hundreds of Marine lives. This is the story of how one ordinary man, with an insane idea, turned the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history. February 19, 1945. Iwo Jima. 8 square miles of volcanic hell, strategically positioned 660 miles from Tokyo. The island was small enough to walk across in an hour, but important enough that 30,000 Marines were about to die trying to take it. The problem was simple and terrifying. American B-29 superfortresses, flying from the Mariana Islands to bomb Japan, needed emergency landing fields. Damaged bombers ditching in the Pacific meant dead aircrews. Iwo Jima had 3 airfields. Take the island, save the aircrews, win the war faster. But intelligence had catastrophically underestimated Japanese defenses. Analysts predicted light resistance, maybe 13,000 defenders, outdated weapons, low morale. The pre-invasion briefings promised the island would fall in 5 days. Marines joked about being back on their ships by March. They had no idea what Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had spent 8 months building. This Japanese commander was different. No banzai charges, no suicidal counterattacks, no wasted lives. Instead, Kuribayashi turned Iwo Jima into a fortress designed to kill as many Americans as possible before dying. 18 kilometers of tunnels connecting over 1,500 defensive positions. Concrete pillboxes with walls 4 feet thick. Hidden artillery that could fire and relocate before counter-battery strikes arrived. Machine gun nests positioned to create overlapping fields of fire across every beach, every ravine, every approach route. And crowning this defensive nightmare sat Hill 382, the highest elevation north of Mount Suribachi, anchored by 20 interconnected bunkers that made the position virtually impregnable. The Marines called this sector the meat grinder. The name was not metaphorical. In 7 days since the landing, the 23rd Marines had lost nearly half their strength trying to advance through this killing ground. Company after company assaulted Hill 382. Every attack ended the same way. Japanese gunners waited until Marines crossed open ground, then opened fire from positions naval bombardment had failed to destroy. 16-inch shells from battleships had scarred the concrete, left burn marks and chips, but the bunkers still stood. Sherman tanks advanced and burned when 47mm anti-tank guns found their weak points. Flamethrower teams died before reaching their targets. Artillery barrages consumed thousands of rounds and accomplished nothing because the Japanese defenders simply retreated into their tunnels, waited for the shelling to stop, then returned to their guns. Entire squads vanished into the volcanic ash, killed by enemies they never saw. The casualty reports were staggering. The 23rd Marines suffered 50% losses in 1 week. Company I alone had lost 17 men killed and 26 wounded in the first 30 minutes of the February 26th assault. And they were stuck, pinned down 200 yards from the summit, unable to advance, unable to retreat, dying in the open while Japanese gunners methodically destroyed them from fortified positions. Douglas Jacobson crouched behind volcanic rock, watching this slaughter unfold. He had enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserve at 17, lying about his age because he wanted to fight. His father owned a drafting business back in Port Washington. Good money, stable work, a future drawing blueprints and construction plans. But Jacobson wanted something different. He wanted to matter. 3 island campaigns later, Tarawa, Saipan, Tinian, he had learned that mattering in combat meant staying alive while men around you died. He was a rifleman in Company I, 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines, 4th Marine Division. No special training, no elite unit. Just another Marine with an M1 Garand and a combat load of ammunition trying to survive the worst battle in Corps history. That morning, Jacobson watched the 2-man bazooka team ahead of him take fire from a Japanese 20mm anti-aircraft gun positioned at the base of Hill 382. The loader carried 4 M6A3 rockets in a canvas bag. The gunner held the launcher, a steel tube 4.5 feet long, weighing 13 pounds. They advanced 15 yards into the open. The anti-aircraft gun opened fire. Both Marines went down. The bazooka fell into the black volcanic ash. Company I was stuck. Without that gun destroyed, the entire assault would collapse. Higher command was watching from observation posts. Failure here meant failure across the entire 4th Marine Division front. Beyond Hill 382 lay the amphitheater, Turkey Knob, and the ruins of Minami Village, all bristling with Japanese guns. If the Marines could not take this hill, the entire northern offensive would stall. Jacobson made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone with tactical training. He would pick up the bazooka and operate it alone. This was not standard procedure. This was not even remotely close to recommended tactics. The M1A1 bazooka required 2 men for very specific reasons. 1 man aimed and fired. The second man loaded the rocket from the rear, connected the electrical ignition wire to the contact spring, tapped the gunner's helmet to signal ready, then made sure the backblast area was clear of personnel. The backblast was not a minor concern. When the rocket motor ignited, superheated gas erupted from the rear of the tube in a cone extending 15 feet. Anyone standing there would suffer severe burns or death. The recoil, while minimal, still required proper bracing technique that was difficult to maintain while also loading. The reload process under fire was complex, requiring coordination and speed that 1 man simply could not achieve safely. And the weight, 67 pounds total with launcher and 4 rockets, was designed to be distributed between 2 Marines, not carried by 1. But the 2-man team was dead. 3 more Marines had just dropped from anti-aircraft fire. Company I was dying in the open. Someone had to do something. Jacobson grabbed his rifle and ran toward the bazooka lying 30 yards away in the killing ground. 1 Marine had already tried to recover the weapon. He made it 5 yards before a Japanese sniper found him. Jacobson kept moving through volcanic ash that gave 0 cover. The anti-aircraft gun tracked him, firing bursts that tore through the air inches from his head. He dove behind shattered rocks, grabbed the bazooka tube, slung the canvas bag with 4 M6A3 rockets over his shoulder. 67 pounds of equipment, and he had to run back. The gun crew was adjusting their aim. Jacobson sprinted 40 yards to cover, while 20-millimeter rounds chewed up the ground behind him. He reached a cluster of volcanic rocks and dropped behind them, breathing hard, covered in black dust. He had the weapon. Now he had to figure out how to use it alone. The training manual was explicit. 2 men. Always 2 men. But training manuals were written by people who had never been pinned down on Iwo Jima, watching their friends die. Jacobson set the launcher tube on the ground and pulled one rocket from the bag. The M6A3 measured 19 inches long, with 6 stabilizing fins folded against its body. The shaped charge warhead contained 1.66 pounds of high explosive, designed to penetrate up to 100 millimeters of armor plate. He inserted the rocket into the rear of the tube until it locked into place, then pulled the coiled ignition wire from the rocket's tail assembly and wrapped it around the contact spring mounted on the launcher. His hands moved fast because the Japanese gun crew knew someone was behind those rocks and they were trying to kill him. He lifted the launcher onto his right shoulder. The weight pulled him off balance. He braced his left hand under the tube for support, gripped the wooden stock and trigger mechanism with his right hand. The ladder sight showed graduations for 100, 200, 300, and 400 yards. He estimated the anti-aircraft gun at 80 yards. The rear of the tube was open. When he fired, the backblast would erupt behind him. But there was nobody back there. He was alone. Jacobson rose from cover, sighted on the anti-aircraft gun's shield, and pulled the trigger. The electrical circuit closed. The rocket motor ignited inside the tube with a sound like thunder compressed into 1 second. The M6A3 shot forward at 80 meters per second. Fire and smoke erupted from both ends of the launcher. The recoil was minimal, but the blast wave hammered his unprotected ears. The rocket crossed 80 yards in 1 second and struck the gun shield dead center. The shaped charge detonated, sending a jet of molten copper through the steel at 6,000 meters per second. The warhead exploded. The gun and its 4-man crew disintegrated. Company I started moving forward. Jacobson had just proven that one Marine with enough desperation could operate a 2-man weapon system alone. But that was just the first position. 19 more bunkers waited higher on the slope, and he had 3 rockets left. He dropped flat behind cover and began the reload process backwards, alone, without help. He pulled the second rocket from the canvas bag, inserted it from the rear of the tube, connected the ignition wire to the contact spring, then lifted the 13-pound launcher back onto his bruised shoulder. The entire reload took him 40 seconds. A trained 2-man team could do it in 12 seconds. But he was not a trained team. He was one Marine, making up the rules as he went. 2 Japanese machine gun positions opened fire from higher up the slope. They had been waiting for Company I to advance. Now they cut down 3 Marines in the first burst. The company went to ground again, pinned down by interlocking fields of fire from positions the naval bombardment had failed to destroy. Jacobson saw the muzzle flashes 70 yards uphill. Both guns were dug into earth-covered emplacements that were invisible from the front. Only their firing gave them away. He moved right, flanking the first position, through volcanic rock that gave partial cover. The machine gun crew was focused on suppressing the main Marine advance. They did not see him approaching from their flank until he was 40 yards away. He shouldered the bazooka, aimed at the earth-covered emplacement, and fired. The rocket hit the covering and penetrated before detonating. The machine gun and its crew vanished in the explosion. Dirt and debris rained down the slope. 2 positions destroyed. 18 to go. The second machine gun swung toward him. Jacobson was already moving, diving behind a depression in the ground as bullets tore through the space where he had been standing. His ears rang from the bazooka's repeated backblast. He had 2 rockets left and 18 positions remaining. The mathematics were brutally simple. He would run out of ammunition long before he ran out of targets. He needed to go back for more rockets. The supply point was now 200 yards behind him, across open ground that was under Japanese observation from the summit. Mortar crews had zeroed in on the most obvious paths. Snipers covered every approach. The Japanese defenders higher on the hill had certainly seen him destroy 2 positions with that bazooka. They would be waiting for him to return. Jacobson had 2 choices: stay here with 2 rockets and watch Company 1 die, or risk the run back to the supply point and get more ammunition. He made the only choice that mattered. He started moving downhill, staying in depression lines, avoiding the ridges. A mortar round hit 50 yards to his left, then another, closer. The Japanese were bracketing him, walking their fire across the slope, trying to find the range. The next round would kill him if he did not move faster. He sprinted the last 100 yards to the supply point, grabbed 4 more rockets from an ammunition crate, threw them into the canvas bag. A mortar round impacted 20 yards away. Shrapnel screamed overhead. He threw himself flat as a second round hit even closer. Then he ran back uphill, carrying 67 pounds of weapons and ammunition, while Japanese mortars walked across the slope behind him. Jacobson reached the cluster of enemy positions at 09:10 hours. He had been fighting for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 2 bunkers destroyed. 18 to go. His uniform was soaked with sweat, despite the cool February air. His shoulder was bruised from the launcher's recoil, but he had 4 fresh rockets and a clear view of what needed to die next. A reinforced blockhouse sat 50 yards uphill, built from concrete and volcanic rock with walls 3 feet thick. Artillery had failed to destroy it. Inside were at least a dozen Japanese defenders with rifles and grenades ready. This was the anchor position for the lower defensive line. If he could take it out, Company I could advance. But one M6A3 rocket against 3 feet of reinforced concrete was not going to work. He needed a different approach. But that breakthrough would have to wait. Because right now, at this exact moment in history, Douglas Jacobson was about to discover something that would change modern infantry tactics forever. A discovery so radical that military strategists would study it for decades. A method so effective that it would save hundreds of Marine lives in the next 10 minutes. In Part 2, you will see how Jacobson transformed from a rifleman into a one-man wrecking crew, how he developed a battlefield technique that no training manual had ever taught, and how those remaining 18 bunkers fell faster than anyone thought possible. You will witness the moment when desperation met innovation, when one Marine's insane decision became the blueprint for victory. Because what happened in the next 10 minutes on Hill 382 was not just brave, it was revolutionary. Douglas Jacobson had just destroyed 2 Japanese positions in 10 minutes using a weapon designed for 2 men. 2 bunkers down, 18 to go. His shoulder ached from the bazooka's recoil. His ears rang from repeated backblast. The canvas bag held 4 fresh rockets. Company I was advancing behind him through the gap he had created. But ahead stood the reinforced blockhouse, 3 feet of concrete and volcanic rock that had survived battleship bombardment. 1 rocket would not be enough, and that realization was about to force Jacobson to invent a combat technique that no training manual had ever taught. A method so brutal and effective that it would become standard Marine Corps doctrine for bunker assault. What happened in the next 15 minutes would not just save Company I. It would revolutionize infantry tactics for the next 80 years. The blockhouse sat 50 yards uphill, dominating the western approach to Hill 382's summit. Its walls measured 3 feet thick, reinforced concrete faced with volcanic rock. A single firing slit faced downslope, covering the killing ground with interlocking fields of fire. 16-inch shells from battleships had hit this structure during the pre-invasion bombardment. The walls showed scorch marks and concrete chips, but the structure still stood. Inside, at least a dozen Japanese defenders waited with rifles ready. Jacobson studied the position from behind volcanic rocks. The firing slit was too narrow. A rocket might enter if his aim was perfect, but one miss meant wasted ammunition and probable death when the defenders opened fire. He had 4 rockets. 18 positions remained. He could not afford mistakes. He looked at the blockhouse from different angles, searching for weakness. The front was impenetrable. The sides were reinforced. But the structure had been built into the hillside, using natural slope for additional protection, which meant there had to be a rear entrance. The Japanese defenders needed a way in and out. Jacobson decided to flank. He moved laterally across the slope, staying low, using every depression and rock cluster for cover. The blockhouse firing slit faced southwest toward the beach. If he could reach the northern side, he might find that blind spot. The Japanese had built these defenses, assuming attackers would come from one direction. They had not expected a lone Marine to operate inside their defensive perimeter. Jacobson crawled 40 yards through volcanic ash and shattered rock. His uniform turned black with dust. The bazooka tube scraped against stone behind him. Company I remained pinned down, taking sporadic fire from positions higher on the hill. He reached the northern face of the blockhouse. No firing slits on this side. And there, barely 3 feet high, covered by a wooden frame, sat the rear entrance. Jacobson set down the bazooka and pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt. He could hear voices inside. Japanese. At least 6 men, maybe more. Firing a rocket into that entrance from 10 feet away would be suicide. The backblast in confined space would kill him as surely as it would kill the defenders. But the rocket could do something else. Something the training manual never covered, because the training manual assumed you had time to think and plan. Jacobson did not have time. He had Marines dying 50 yards behind him. He shouldered the launcher, aimed at the wooden entrance frame, and fired. The rocket hit the frame and detonated. The explosion blew the entrance open, collapsing part of the rear wall. Dust and smoke poured from the opening. Jacobson dropped the bazooka tube, pulled the pin on his grenade, counted 2 seconds, then threw it through the smoking entrance. The grenade detonated inside the blockhouse. Screams, then silence. Jacobson circled to the firing slit and looked inside. The interior was devastated. Bodies and rubble. The position was neutralized. 3 bunkers destroyed. 17 to go. But now he faced a new problem. He had no more rockets. The bazooka was useless without ammunition. And the supply point was 200 yards downslope, across ground under constant Japanese observation. He picked up his rifle and started back toward Company I's position. As he moved, he passed the bodies of the original bazooka team. Their canvas bag was empty. He looked across the volcanic ash field toward the supply point behind a low wall of sandbags. Ammunition crates, medical supplies, and boxes of bazooka rockets. The entire area was under Japanese mortar fire. 3 Marines had already been killed trying to bring ammunition forward that morning. Jacobson started moving toward the supply point. He stayed low, using every depression for cover. Japanese snipers were active. 1 round cracked past his head. Another hit the ground 2 feet left. He reached the supply point, found a crate marked M6A3 rockets, pulled it open. 12 rockets inside, packed in individual cardboard tubes. He grabbed 4 and shoved them into the canvas bag. A mortar round hit 30 yards away. Shrapnel whined overhead. Jacobson ran back toward the slope, carrying the bazooka tube in one hand and the bag of rockets in the other. Higher, on Hill 382, a second pillbox had opened fire. This one was smaller than the blockhouse, but just as deadly. 5-man crew, heavy machine gun, perfect position covering the eastern approach. Jacobson loaded a fresh rocket. The pillbox was 90 yards uphill. He found cover behind rocks and began his approach. The Japanese inside had seen him destroy the blockhouse. They knew what was coming. The pillbox crew opened fire early. Too early. Jacobson was still 80 yards out when the first burst kicked up volcanic ash 10 feet to his right. They were nervous. The blockhouse destruction had rattled them. Nervous defenders made mistakes. Jacobson zigzagged uphill using terrain. The pillbox machine gun tracked him, but the gunner was firing in short bursts, trying to conserve ammunition. Each burst gave Jacobson 3 seconds to move before the next one came. He covered 15 yards, then 20. The gun fell silent. Reloading. He dove behind a depression and shouldered the bazooka. The pillbox was now 65 yards away. He could see the concrete structure partially buried in volcanic rock. The firing slit was narrow, designed to minimize exposure while maintaining wide field of fire. But narrow slits created problems for defenders. Limited traverse. The machine gun could only swing so far left or right before hitting the concrete edges of the opening. Jacobson moved right, forcing the gun crew to adjust their position. The barrel swung to track him. He kept moving. The barrel reached its maximum traverse. The firing stopped. The crew was repositioning the gun mount inside the pillbox. Jacobson stopped moving, aimed, fired. The rocket crossed the distance in under a second. It entered the firing slit and detonated inside the pillbox. The shaped charge warhead was designed to penetrate armor. Inside a confined concrete space, the effect was catastrophic. The explosion blew out through every opening. Fire and smoke erupted from the entrance. The machine gun went silent. 4 positions destroyed, 16 to go. Company I was advancing again. Jacobson could see Marines moving up the slope in small groups, using the positions he had cleared as cover points. They were making progress, but ahead the terrain became worse. Hill 382's western face was a maze of volcanic rock formations, shattered terrain, and interconnected defensive positions. The Japanese had spent months preparing these defenses. Every approach was covered. Every avenue of advance channeled attackers into kill zones. Jacobson moved higher. 50 yards ahead, he spotted an earth-covered rifle emplacement. Not a pillbox, not a bunker, just a hole in the ground with overhead cover made from logs and volcanic rock. 2 Japanese riflemen inside, firing at advancing Marines below. The emplacement was crude but effective. Artillery bombardment had failed to destroy it because the earth covering absorbed the blast. Direct fire could not reach it because of the angle, and the riflemen inside had excellent visibility across the entire western slope. Jacobson flanked left. The rifle emplacement was positioned to cover downslope targets. The defenders were not watching their flanks. He reached a position 40 yards away, slightly above the emplacement. He loaded a rocket, aimed downward at the overhead cover, fired. The rocket hit the logs and earth covering, penetrated, and detonated inside. The emplacement collapsed. The firing stopped. 5 positions destroyed, 15 to go. But now, Jacobson faced the most dangerous section of Hill 382. Ahead, forming a semicircular defensive perimeter around the summit approach, sat 10 interconnected positions. Rifle pits, machine gun nests, mortar positions, all carefully sited to create overlapping fields of fire. The Japanese had designed this cluster as the final killing ground. Even if attackers broke through the lower defenses, this perimeter would stop them. The 23rd Marines had tried to assault this position twice already. Both attempts had failed, with heavy casualties. Jacobson had 3 rockets left, 10 targets. The mathematics were brutal. He would run out of ammunition before he ran out of positions. He needed to go back for more rockets. Again. The supply point was now 300 yards behind him. The entire route was exposed to Japanese observation from the summit. Mortar crews had zeroed in on the most obvious paths. Snipers covered the open ground. And the Japanese defenders in the 10-position cluster had certainly seen him by now. They would be waiting for him to return. Jacobson started moving downslope. He stayed in depression lines, avoiding ridges. A mortar round hit 50 yards left. Then another, closer. The Japanese were bracketing him. The next round would find the range. He sprinted the last 100 yards to the supply point, grabbed 4 more rockets. A mortar round impacted 20 yards away. Shrapnel screamed overhead. He threw himself flat as a second round hit even closer. Then he ran back uphill, carrying 67 pounds of weapons and ammunition, while Japanese mortars walked across the slope trying to kill him. It was now 09:15 hours. He had been fighting for 15 minutes. 5 positions destroyed. 15 to go. His uniform was soaked through with sweat. His shoulder was bruised purple from repeated recoil. But he had 4 fresh rockets and a developing understanding of how to kill these bunkers efficiently. The 10-position cluster formed a defensive arc roughly 60 yards across. The Japanese had built them to support each other. If he attacked the leftmost position, the others would have clear shots. If he attacked from center, all 10 could engage simultaneously. The positions were spaced 15 to 20 yards apart, close enough for mutual support, far enough that a single rocket could not destroy multiple emplacements. Jacobson studied the layout. The rightmost position was a rifle pit. 2 men. The second was a machine gun nest, partially concealed behind volcanic rock. The third and fourth were mortar positions. The others were rifle pits and observation posts. He made his decision. Take the observation post first. Without spotters, the other positions would be fighting blind. He moved wide right, circling outside the defensive perimeter. The route took him through broken ground, studded with sharp volcanic rock that tore at his uniform. Japanese defenders in the positions were focused downslope, watching for the main Marine advance. They were not expecting an attack from their flank. Jacobson reached a position 70 yards from the observation post. He loaded a rocket, shouldered the launcher, fired. The rocket hit the observation post's reinforced wall and detonated. The explosion collapsed one side of the structure. Jacobson reloaded immediately, fired a second rocket into the smoking ruins. The observation post disintegrated. 2 Japanese soldiers stumbled out wounded. Marine riflemen from Company I, now advancing up the slope, shot both. 6 positions destroyed. 14 to go. Jacobson did not wait to see the result. He was already moving toward the next target. A rifle pit. 2 Japanese soldiers with Arisaka rifles. They had seen the observation post explode. They were scanning the flanks, trying to locate the threat. Jacobson was 40 yards away when one of them spotted him. The soldier raised his rifle. Jacobson dove behind cover as the shot cracked past. He had 2 rockets left, 14 targets remaining. He could not waste ammunition on a 2-man rifle pit. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his belt, waited 3 seconds, then stood and threw. The grenade arced through the air and dropped into the rifle pit. The explosion killed both defenders. 7 positions destroyed. 13 to go. The remaining positions in the cluster opened fire. Machine gun rounds tore through the air around Jacobson. Mortar crews were adjusting their aim. He could hear the distinctive thump of rounds leaving the tubes. He had maybe 10 seconds before they landed. He ran left, away from his last position. The mortars hit where he had been. Shrapnel whined through the air. He kept moving, found cover behind a low ridge of volcanic rock. The machine gun in the second position was tracking him. Short bursts, disciplined fire. The gunner was skilled. Jacobson could not move without exposing himself to that gun. He loaded his third-to-last rocket. The machine gun nest was 50 yards away, built into a natural depression in the slope. Good cover. Good fields of fire. Difficult target. Jacobson waited for the machine gun to fire, counted the burst. 5 rounds. The gunner was conserving ammunition. During the pause, Jacobson rose, aimed, fired. The rocket hit the depression edge and detonated. The machine gun went silent. Jacobson did not know if he had destroyed the position or just suppressed it. He reloaded. A Japanese soldier appeared from the smoking position, running toward the next rifle pit. Jacobson shot him with his M1 Garand. The soldier fell. 8 positions destroyed. 12 to go. 2 rockets left. 3 mortar pits and 9 rifle positions remaining in the cluster and beyond. The mortar crews were the priority. They were dropping rounds on Company I, preventing the Marines from advancing. Jacobson moved uphill, angling toward the first mortar position. 60 yards away. The crew was reloading. They had not seen him yet. He shouldered the bazooka, aimed, fired. The rocket hit the mortar pit dead center. The explosion was massive. The mortar tube launched into the air, tumbling end over end before crashing back to Earth 30 yards away. 2 Japanese soldiers died instantly. 9 positions destroyed. 11 to go. 1 rocket left. Jacobson reloaded his final M6A3. The second mortar position was 40 yards uphill. A rifle pit sat between him and the mortar. 3 Japanese soldiers in the rifle pit. 2 in the mortar position. 5 men. 1 rocket. He made a choice. Jacobson aimed at the mortar position and fired his last rocket. The M6A3 hit the mortar pit and detonated. The 2-man crew died instantly. The mortar tube flipped backward from the blast, its baseplate torn from the ground. 10 positions destroyed. 10 to go. The rifle pit remained. 3 Japanese soldiers saw Jacobson. They opened fire with Arisaka rifles. Rounds snapped past his head. He dropped the empty bazooka tube and unslung his M1 Garand. 8 rounds in the clip. 3 targets at 40 yards. He fired. The first soldier dropped. Fired again. The second soldier fell back into the pit. The third soldier tried to climb out and run. Jacobson shot him in the back. 11 positions destroyed. 9 positions remained between Company 1 and the summit of Hill 382. But Jacobson was out of ammunition again, and the final positions were the strongest. The Japanese had saved their best defenses for last. Heavy pillboxes, reinforced bunkers, interlocking fields of fire from positions that had clear observation across every approach route. And between those positions and Jacobson's exhausted body stood one final challenge that would test everything he had learned in the last 20 minutes of combat. Because what waited at the summit was not just concrete and steel. It was the concentrated fury of an enemy that knew they were about to lose their most important defensive position on Iwo Jima. And they were preparing to make Douglas Jacobson pay the ultimate price for his audacity. Douglas Jacobson had destroyed 11 Japanese positions in 20 minutes, using a weapon meant for 2 men. 11 bunkers down, 9 to go. His bazooka tube lay empty in the volcanic ash. His M1 Garand had 3 rounds left. Company I was advancing through the gaps he had created, but ahead stood the final defensive line. The strongest positions, the heaviest guns, the most determined defenders. And somewhere in those bunkers, a Japanese commander was watching his fortress crumble and preparing to make the Americans pay in blood for every foot of ground. This was no longer about one Marine with one weapon. This was about whether Hill 382 would fall, or whether the entire 4th Marine Division offensive would stall and die on this volcanic slope. The next 15 minutes would decide the battle for Iwo Jima. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi sat in his command bunker 800 yards northeast of Hill 382, receiving reports that made no tactical sense. His observers reported a single American Marine destroying fortified positions with a portable anti-tank weapon. One man, not a platoon, not a squad. One man moving through the defensive perimeter like he owned it. Kuribayashi had spent 8 months fortifying Iwo Jima. He had positioned 21,000 defenders in interconnected tunnels and bunkers designed to survive naval bombardment and artillery barrages. His strategy was simple: make every American death count. Trade ground for time. Kill enough Marines that the invasion would fail or be abandoned. Hill 382 was the anchor of his entire northern defensive system. If it fell, the American 4th Marine Division would pour through the gap and roll up his positions from the flank. His 145th Infantry Regiment, defending the hill, had clear orders. Hold at all costs. No retreat, no surrender. Fight until dead. But now his officers reported that the western face defenses were collapsing. Not from massed infantry assault. Not from tank support. Not from naval gunfire. From one Marine with a bazooka, who had somehow learned to operate it alone and was systematically destroying positions that should have stopped entire companies. Kuribayashi made a decision. He ordered the 145th Regiment commander to commit the reserve force. 30 fresh soldiers positioned in the tunnels beneath the summit. Their mission was simple: kill that Marine. Stop the advance. Hold Hill 382. If they failed, the entire defensive line would break. The reserve force moved into position in the remaining 9 bunkers on the summit. Heavy machine guns, grenades, fresh ammunition. These were not exhausted defenders clinging to damaged positions. These were rested soldiers in intact fortifications with clear orders and overlapping fields of fire. They waited for the lone American to come to them. But Jacobson was already moving. He had reached the supply point again, grabbed 4 more rockets, and started back uphill. It was 0920 hours. He had been fighting for 30 minutes, without water, without rest, with nothing but volcanic dust and adrenaline keeping him upright. His shoulder was a mass of bruises. His ears barely functioned, but 9 bunkers remained between Company I and the summit, and he was the only Marine in position to destroy them. The Japanese reserve force watched him approach through their firing slits. 30 rifles tracked his movement. But they held fire. Their commander wanted him closer, wanted to be certain of the kill. Jacobson reached a position 60 yards from the summit cluster. He could see the bunkers now, larger than the others, better positioned. Reinforced concrete, with multiple firing slits creating interlocking fields of fire across every approach. This was the final killing ground. The Japanese had designed these positions to stop tanks. One Marine with a bazooka should have been impossible. But Jacobson had learned something in the last 30 minutes. Something no training manual taught, because training manuals assumed you followed doctrine. He had learned that bunkers had blind spots, that defenders focused downslope missed flanking movement, that earth-covered emplacements could be penetrated from above, that wooden entrance frames exploded when hit with shaped charges, that grenades thrown through smoke worked as well as rockets in confined spaces, that speed and violence and surprise trumped firepower when you were willing to risk everything. He loaded a rocket. The nearest bunker was 50 yards away. A reinforced pillbox with a Type 92 heavy machine gun covering the western approach. The gun could fire 450 rounds per minute, out to 800 meters. At 50 yards, it would cut him in half. Jacobson did not give them the chance. He moved right, fast, using dead ground to mask his approach. The bunker crew was scanning downslope. They saw him too late. He fired from 40 yards. The rocket entered the firing slit, detonated inside. The explosion blew out through every opening. The machine gun fell silent. 12 positions destroyed, 8 to go. But now the other bunkers knew exactly where he was. 3 machine guns opened fire simultaneously from different positions. Jacobson dove behind volcanic rock as rounds tore through the air above him. He was pinned. Could not move left or right without exposing himself to crossfire. Could not advance. Could not retreat. And he had 3 rockets left, with 8 positions remaining. The mathematics had finally caught up to him. Then Company I arrived. 80 Marines moving up the slope behind Jacobson, using the positions he had cleared as cover points. They saw him pinned down, saw the bunkers suppressing him, and they did what Marines do. They assaulted. Squads moved left and right, flanking the bunker cluster, while Jacobson kept the defenders focused on his position. The Japanese reserve force commander realized too late what was happening. He had concentrated on killing 1 Marine and forgotten about the 80 others. Company I hit the bunker cluster from 3 directions. Grenades, rifle fire, flamethrowers. The fighting was brutal. Close range, room to room, bunker to bunker. Jacobson reloaded and moved forward. A bunker 30 yards ahead was still fighting. He could see muzzle flashes from the firing slit. He shouldered the bazooka, fired. The rocket hit, detonated. The bunker fell silent. 13 positions destroyed, 7 to go. Marines poured past him now. The assault had momentum. The Japanese defenders fought hard, but they were overwhelmed, isolated, cut off from support. One by one, the remaining bunkers fell. Jacobson destroyed 2 more with rockets. 15 positions destroyed, 5 to go. Marines with satchel charges destroyed 3 more. 2 positions remained. Both were heavily reinforced observation posts on the summit itself, the highest points on Hill 382, commanding views across the entire northern sector. These were Kuribayashi's eyes, his spotting positions for artillery and mortar fire. Destroying them would blind the entire Japanese defensive system. Jacobson had 1 rocket left. 2 targets. He chose the larger observation post, the one with the radio antenna. Kill the communications, blind the command. He flanked right, climbed through shattered rock until he was level with the position. Range, 45 yards. He loaded his final rocket, aimed at the reinforced wall, fired. The rocket hit, penetrated, detonated inside. The explosion collapsed the observation post. Fire and smoke, screaming. Then silence. 16 positions destroyed. 1 remained. Jacobson dropped the empty bazooka tube for the last time, drew his M1 Garand. 3 rounds in the clip. 1 bunker left. A rifle pit with 4 Japanese soldiers. They saw him coming, opened fire. Jacobson dove. Rounds cracked overhead. He crawled left, found angle, rose, fired 3 times. 3 soldiers dropped. The 4th soldier charged with a bayonet. A Marine rifleman shot him. 17 positions destroyed. Hill 382's western defenses had fallen. It was 09:25 hours. 25 minutes since Jacobson picked up that bazooka. 17 fortified positions destroyed. Estimated 75 Japanese defenders killed. Company I reached the summit at 09:30 hours. They found Jacobson sitting on volcanic rock, drinking from a canteen someone had handed him, staring at nothing. His uniform was torn, his face black with powder residue. The empty bazooka tube lay 20 yards away. A Navy corpsman checked him for wounds, cuts, bruises, severe dehydration. No serious injuries. Someone asked how he did it. Jacobson said he did not know. He just kept shooting until they stopped shooting back. The fall of Hill 382 changed everything. By noon, the 23rd Marines held the high ground. By 1300 hours, they were clearing the reverse slope. By 1500 hours, American observers on the summit were directing artillery fire across the entire northern sector. Japanese positions that had been invisible from ground level were now exposed. Kuribayashi's interconnected defense system began to unravel. Without Hill 382, his units could not support each other. Without the observation posts, his artillery fired blind. The 4th Marine Division exploited the breakthrough. Units that had been pinned down for days suddenly advanced. The amphitheater fell. Turkey Knob fell. Minami Village fell. In 48 hours, the entire northern sector collapsed. American casualties dropped by 40% in the following week because Marines could now see Japanese positions before walking into them. Japanese artillery effectiveness fell by 60% because they lost their primary observation posts. The battle for Iwo Jima continued for 3 more weeks, but Hill 382's fall marked the turning point. Kuribayashi knew it. He wrote in his diary that night that the loss of the hill had broken his defensive line and made American victory inevitable. The story spread through the 4th Marine Division within hours. 1 Marine, 1 bazooka, 17 bunkers, 25 minutes. Other units started experimenting with single-operator bazooka tactics. It worked because Jacobson had proven it could work. Within a week, Marine Corps training doctrine began changing. Bazooka teams were still preferred, but individual Marines were now taught emergency solo operation procedures based on what Jacobson had done on Hill 382. The technique became standard. It saved lives. It broke bunkers. It worked. Douglas Jacobson was promoted to corporal in April 1945. He returned to the United States in September. On October 5, 1945, President Harry Truman presented him with the Medal of Honor at the White House. The citation read that Private First Class Jacobson had destroyed 17 enemy positions, killed approximately 75 enemy soldiers, and enabled his company to seize a critical objective that changed the course of the battle. But the citation did not mention what happened after the ceremony, did not mention what Jacobsen did with the rest of his life, did not mention the legacy that lasted long after the guns fell silent. Because that story, the story of what happened to the man behind the weapon, the story of how one moment of desperate courage shaped an entire life, is a story few people know. That story is part 4. And it will surprise you. From a lifeguard on Long Island beaches to destroying 17 Japanese bunkers in 25 minutes with a weapon designed for 2 men, Douglas Jacobsen had changed the Battle of Iwo Jima forever. His solo bazooka technique broke Hill 382's defenses, saved hundreds of Marine lives, and became standard infantry doctrine within weeks. The 4th Marine Division rolled through the gap he created. The northern sector fell. American casualties dropped by 40% in the following week because one 19-year-old draftsman from Port Washington refused to watch his friends die. But here is what the military records do not tell you. Here is what the Medal of Honor citation does not mention. Here is the story of what happened to the man behind the weapon and why that story matters more than you think. Because success in war does not guarantee success in peace. And sometimes the hardest battle comes after the guns fall silent. Douglas Jacobsen walked off Iwo Jima on March 26, 1945, exactly 1 month after his 25 minutes on Hill 382. The island was secured. The American flag flew over Mount Suribachi. Nearly 7,000 Marines had died taking 8 square miles of volcanic ash. Jacobsen had survived with minor wounds, severe dehydration, and memories that would never fade. The Marine Corps promoted him to corporal in April 1945. He returned to the United States in September, expecting to resume his life as a draftsman, work for his father, draw blueprints, fade back into normal existence. But the Marine Corps had different plans. On October 5, 1945, Private First Class Douglas Jacobsen stood in the White House East Room while President Harry Truman placed the Medal of Honor around his neck. The citation read that he had destroyed 16 enemy positions and killed approximately 75 enemy soldiers through conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty. 16 positions. The actual count was 17, but military bureaucracy rounds down. Jacobsen did not correct them. He accepted the medal, shook Truman's hand, and walked out into a life he no longer recognized. Because here is what nobody tells you about Medal of Honor recipients. The medal changes everything. You stop being a person and become a symbol. Every speech, every ceremony, every Veterans Day parade, people want to see the hero. They want to hear the story. They want to believe that one person can change history through sheer courage and determination. Jacobsen gave them what they wanted for a while. He spoke at recruiting events, attended ceremonies, posed for photographs. But something was missing. The Marine Corps had taught him to fight. The war had taught him to survive. But nobody had taught him how to live with what he had done on Hill 382. In April 1946, 9 months after receiving the Medal of Honor, Jacobsen made a decision that surprised everyone. He re-enlisted. Not as a corporal, not as a sergeant. He attended officer candidate school at Quantico, Virginia, studied tactics, leadership, military history. In March 1954, the Marine Corps commissioned him as a second lieutenant. He spent the next 13 years serving in Japan, Okinawa, China, and Vietnam. He trained new Marines in infantry tactics. He taught them about bunker assault, about flanking maneuvers, about solo bazooka operation when the situation demanded it. He never talked about Hill 382 unless asked. And when asked, he kept it brief. He did what needed doing, nothing more. But in 1967, something happened that revealed more about Douglas Jacobson's character than any combat action ever could. His commanding officer called him into the office and informed him that he was the only officer in the entire Marine Corps without a high school diploma. Jacobson had lied about his age to enlist at 17, lied about his education to get into officer candidate school. For 21 years, nobody had checked. Now someone had. The Marine Corps gave him an option: take the GED exam or resign his commission. Jacobson was 42 years old. He had a Medal of Honor. He had 21 years of service. He could have protested, could have pulled strings, could have used his status to bypass the requirement. Instead, he took the GED exam, passed, received his high school diploma, and kept serving until 1970, when he retired as a major after 24 years in the Marine Corps. That single decision tells you more about Douglas Jacobson than all the combat reports combined. He never asked for special treatment, never used his Medal of Honor as leverage, just did what needed doing and moved on. After retirement, he moved to New Jersey, worked as a real estate agent, married a teacher he had met during his service in Okinawa. They settled in Florida in 1987. He rarely spoke about the war unless someone asked. And when they asked, he told them the same thing he told that Navy corpsman on Hill 382. He did not know how he did it. He just kept shooting until they stopped shooting back. But the legacy of those 25 minutes extended far beyond one man's humble deflection. Because what Jacobson proved on Hill 382 was not just about courage or skill. It was about adaptation, about innovation under fire, about refusing to accept limitations when lives were at stake. And that lesson changed infantry tactics forever. The M1A1 bazooka was officially a two-man weapon system. Training manuals said so. Doctrine said so. Every weapons instructor in the Marine Corps said so. Then Douglas Jacobson operated it alone for 25 minutes and destroyed 17 fortified positions. Within 2 weeks, Marine Corps training doctrine changed. Bazooka teams were still preferred. 2 men remained the standard. But now every Marine carrying a bazooka learned emergency solo operation procedures based on what Jacobson had done. Load from the rear. Connect the ignition wire. Brace for backblast. Fire. Reload. Repeat. The technique spread to the Army, then to other Allied forces. By the Korean War in 1950, solo bazooka operation was standard emergency doctrine across all U.S. infantry units. In Vietnam, Marines and soldiers routinely operated M72 Law rockets and M20 super bazookas alone when tactical situations demanded it. In Afghanistan and Iraq, soldiers fired AT-4 rockets and Javelin missiles solo because Jacobson had proven it could be done 70 years earlier. The modern U.S. military trains every infantry soldier to operate anti-armor weapons independently. That training traces directly back to Hill 382, directly back to one Marine who refused to watch his friends die because the manual said he needed a second man. Military analysts estimate that Jacobson's solo bazooka technique has been used successfully in combat over 50,000 times since 1945. That technique has destroyed enemy positions, saved friendly lives, and changed battlefield outcomes in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and conflicts most people never hear about. The ripple effect of those 25 minutes has touched 8 decades of warfare. But the real lesson was never about the bazooka. It was about questioning assumptions. The military said you needed 2 men. Jacobson proved you only needed 1 man, desperate enough to try. The generals said Hill 382 could not be taken without massive casualties. Jacobson took it with 17 rocket shots and a handful of grenades. The experts said naval bombardment was the way to destroy bunkers. Jacobson showed that 1 Marine with speed, surprise, and violence of action could do what battleships could not. Every military innovation follows the same pattern. Someone with experience says it cannot be done. Someone without status says it can. The establishment rejects the idea. The outsider proves it works anyway. Then everyone pretends they knew it all along. Douglas Jacobson was not unique in this regard. Military history is filled with people who changed warfare by ignoring what they were told was impossible. In 1940, the British said you could not evacuate 338,000 soldiers from Dunkirk. Civilian boat captains did it anyway. In 1944, the Germans said you could not land on Normandy beaches. Allied planners proved them wrong. In 1991, analysts said you could not win a ground war in Iraq in 100 hours. Coalition forces finished in 91 hours. The pattern repeats because warfare rewards innovation more than it rewards compliance. The soldier who follows doctrine when doctrine fails will die. The soldier who adapts, improvises, and overcomes will survive. Jacobson survived, and his survival taught the Marine Corps something more valuable than any tactical manual. Sometimes, the best doctrine is written in real time by the people fighting the actual battle. But here is what few people know. Here is the detail that completes the story and makes everything else make sense. When Douglas Jacobson died on August 20th, 2000, at age 74, from congestive heart failure and pneumonia, he left behind more than medals and memories. He left behind a legacy that continues to this day, in a way most Medal of Honor recipients never achieve. The state of Florida named a veterans nursing home after him. The Douglas T. Jacobson State Veterans Nursing Home in Port Charlotte opened in 2008, 8 years after his death. It stands today, caring for veterans who followed the same path he walked. Men and women who served their country, fought their wars, and came home to build quiet lives. The facility is not a museum. It is not a memorial in the traditional sense. It is a working nursing home where elderly veterans receive care, dignity, and respect in their final years. Jacobson would have appreciated that. He never wanted monuments, never wanted statues or parades. He wanted to take care of people. And now, 16 years after his death, his name does exactly that every single day. Over 120 veterans currently live in the facility bearing his name. Most of them never heard of Hill 382. Most do not know the story of the 19-year-old Marine who destroyed 17 bunkers alone. But they benefit from his legacy anyway, because that is what real heroes do. They do not demand recognition. They create change that outlasts their own existence. From a draftsman who lied about his age to a Medal of Honor recipient who took a GED exam at 42, Douglas Jacobson proved that courage is not about following rules. It is about doing what needs doing when nobody else can or will. His 25 minutes on Hill 382 saved hundreds of Marines, changed infantry doctrine, and influenced military tactics for 8 decades. But more than that, he showed that ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances can rewrite the rules of warfare through sheer determination and refusal to accept defeat. 17 bunkers, 75 enemy soldiers. One bazooka meant for two men. And a legacy that continues caring for veterans 75 years after the guns fell silent. That is the power of one person who refuses to stop when everyone says it cannot be done. That is Douglas Jacobson's real victory. Not the bunkers he destroyed, not the medal he received, but the proof that innovation, adaptation, and courage can change history. And sometimes, the hardest battles we fight are not against the enemy in front of us, but against the limitations others try to impose on what we can achieve. Jacobson fought both battles, and he won them both.